Welcome to Recross the Paths, where we celebrate the Cube community one conversation at a time. My name is Cade. Today, I have the pleasure to sit down with Kyle. Thank you for being here, Kyle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Cade. I appreciate it.
Kyle is also known as vacalicious on Reddit, a zone of the Cube community that I am slowly exploring and getting into, so you're going to have to be my guide in the dark, unknown expanses of the internet here.
Happy to help.
So to get things started and kind of set a context so people get to know a little bit about you, and then just from the big picture, Kyle, why Cube? Why is this important to you?
So I love Cube, and I've been playing Cube for a long, long time, so much so that when I was playing Magic in the 90s and early 2000s, my friends and I, my childhood play group, we did a lot of limited. We loved drafting, and of course, we loved drafting Invasion Block, one of the classic, original, really good limited formats. And we drafted a ton of Invasion Block. And of course, the problem when you're doing drafts in like 7th and 8th grade, as we were, is it's not like we were flush with cash. We were kids.
Packs were cheaper then, but
they were
not
cheaper
that
then.
much cheaper.
Exactly. When you have no money, they're still expensive.
That's right.
And so at some point, and I don't know what the genesis of this was, and I would love to know, but at some point, my childhood group, me and a couple of my buddies, the real core members of it, we thought, why do we keep buying packs when we could make our own packs? It'd be a lot cheaper if we just took all of our favorite limited cards and just made packs with them. And so this was in like 1999. I'm telling you, this was a long time ago. And we took all of our favorite limited cards and we just threw them in a giant box. And I will tell you, Cube, the word Cube had not been invented yet. And I know this because I went on the rudimentary internet at the time. I was like, if we're coming up with this and we're in 7th and 8th grade, somebody else has to have come up with this. I'm talking like AOL Explorer days now.
You're asking Jeeves whether or not somebody's come up with this.
I was like, yo, Jeeves, is anybody doing this? And I found one article, a grand total of one article on the internet at that time of a guy who, and I can't even remember where he was in the country, but he was taking all of like the top vintage cards, so like Power 9, all of that kind of stuff, and he was throwing them in a box, and he was doing drafts with friends. And I was like, that's a great idea. I don't have any of the Power 9, and if I did, I definitely wouldn't put them in a box. But I do have like Flame Tongue Kavu and Wrath of God and Hammer of Bogarden and Predator Flagship and all of these cards that are great and limited. And so we threw them in a giant box, and we were so close to the word cube. We called it box, because they were in a box.
Kyle, that's perfect. That's
Thank
so
you.
good.
That was very smart of us. And we started drafting that. We drafted box a bajillion times. It was really like one of those things that our childhood play group revolved around. And I can't even begin to tell you how much fun it was. Again, we're talking 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. We're hanging out at somebody's living room for the entire weekend, and we're just doing draft after draft of this thing. It was basically like a 1,000-card, unsleeved, old bordered. There wasn't a single new bordered card in it. Old bordered, low-powered cube. Again, like I said, the bombs were like Wrath of God, Hammer of Bogarden, Predator Flagship, Lightning Bolt, Landwar Elf.
Sure.
Any of the bombs from Invasion Block, all of the dragons, the 3-color dragons, those OG.
Yeah, like Treva and Newmont.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those were all amazing in that. So any of those cards, and that's what we did for years and years and years. And again, I didn't know anybody else doing it. And I kept going online to see if anyone else was doing it. All I ever saw was that one article. So we did that for a long, long time. And the same things I enjoyed about that version of Cube that we were playing is the same thing I enjoy about playing Cube now, which is I love all the interactions between cards from different eras, different blocks, different time periods. It's just crazy to me when all these different interactions come, and it's very enjoyable to play with just such a different set of cards that otherwise you would never be able to play with. And that's partly why, my Cube is designed to sort of reflect the game of Magic from its earliest days to its most modern days. And I hope I answered your question.
No, that's great. That's great. So like when you and your friends are sitting down to draft box, was there any thought given to curation? Sounds even too fancy. It was like, were there things
there
to
was
add
no
into?
thought to curation. We were just throwing cards in a box. I mean, I remember once or twice I took the box and I laid it out. I laid out every single card in my parents' living room, which they loved. They loved that I just put 1,000 Magic cards in their living room. They had no idea what any of this was.
Well, both of us as parents, we know that feeling, and we'd be proud of our kids doing
That's very true. Cade and I both have kids now, so we're certainly, we understand this feeling. And there were multiples in there. There were like 4 Landwehr elves, like 3 spirit links,
Nice.
There was
boy, that's great.
No thought to balance, no thought to curation. I say 1,000 cards, but to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you for the life of me how many cards were in there. It had to have been at least 1,000. There was no color balance. It was just everything we had that we thought was fun was thrown in a box, and that was it. That was our curation.
Without sounding so tongue-in-cheek, like, is it so different now? Or does it feel like there are more... does it just feel like there are more rules with an adult sensibility behind
It's much more complicated. There's a lot more tokens now. I would say that's one of the big things. We definitely did not have to have a giant stack of tokens with us every time we played. But otherwise, no. It feels very, very similar. And a lot of the cards that were in box, maybe not a lot, but at least a dozen or so cards from box are in my cube now. So you're right. It's very similar. And the amount of joy I feel is the same.
That's important, right? That, like, the way you enjoy it may be different, but it's still there. The joy is still there. So you've made reference to your cube, and I think that's a helpful jumping off point for thinking about some of the things we want to explore today. But give us the elevator pitch for your primary cube.
Sure. And my cube is called Kyle's f***ing Cube, that I have to abbreviate to F''ing because Cube Cobra does not allow me to swear. You can bleep that out when I say that. Apologies.
I was going to say, yeah, and I will bleep it as well.
And my background image on Cube Cobra is City of Ass, which is all to say that clearly I take this cube very seriously.
Of course.
So Kyle's effing cube, as we will call it without swearing, the point of it is to have fun. That's really what it is. If you come over my house, you come over my dining room, and you draft Kyle's effing cube, you're going to have the most laid-back environment you've ever had. I buy Greek pizza. I serve a lot of whiskey. For people who may or may not know me, one of my jobs is I work in the alcohol industry. I run alcohol magazines. And because of that, I get sent like infinite free amount of alcohol. So I just have endless whiskey. And I put tons of bottles out. And by the way, you don't have to drink.
Right.
I'm just encouraging. If you would like to have a drink, it's there. I'll be perfectly honest with you. If you'd like to enjoy cannabis, it's also there. I actually don't. I can't draft while stoned. I lose track of what's happening. But if my friends want to do it, sure. The whole point is to have fun. It's a fun, laid-back environment. We're not really keeping track of who's winning and who's not. I mean, I guess we do the matchups based on that. But otherwise, we're just having fun. The point is to have fun. I think of my cube in the same way that I think of playing Smash Brothers with my friends.
Sure.
We're just hanging out, having a good time, and we really don't care who wins or who loses. The point is that we're hanging out and having a fun time.
Yeah, like the experience itself is more important than like the balance of card types. Boy, this sounds a lot like box, doesn't it?
I know. I'm forever trying to recapture that youthful happiness of playing box. I really am. And for good reason, because it was great.
Absolutely. Well, and it's kind of funny that you're mentioning it that way. One of those things that Cube Cobra will try to do is to categorize a cube in a particular way based on the content of cards you have. So it's like, technically this is a legacy cube, but it's not going to feel exactly like a traditional legacy cube, right?
Absolutely. And it pained me to list it as a legacy cube on Cube Cobra. It's funny that you notice that because I had the exact same feeling of Cube Cobra. Like, are you really? You want to put this, you want to put that parameters on it? But whatever. I love Cube Cobra. I love the people who run it. God bless them. I'm not trying to criticize Cube Cobra at all. It's a gift to the Cube community. Thank you to everybody over there. We love what you're doing. It does feel weird listing as a Legacy Plus, and I just do that just because it is what it is. But yeah, you're going to find Tolarian Academy in here,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, things like Blurry Beebles.
Blurry Beeble, that's been edited. So you want to talk about the subreddit. One of my favorite things about the Magic Cube subreddit is the great ideas you get from other cubers. And years ago...
Is that sarcastic or not?
No, that is. There's great ideas in there. It's honestly my favorite thing about it, and partly why I run the Share Your X series now is I love sharing ideas. Somebody had a Blurry Beeble that they edited to just say unblockable.
Nice.
They took out the glasses thing. You and I are both wearing glasses. That's right. Card would be very good against us. What about our friends who don't wear glasses? So I did the same thing. I went to my public library, which has a great printing station and a lot of really good creative services there. And I printed out a sticker that I put on a Blurry Beeble, and it just says unblockable now. So yeah, you're going to find edited Blurry Beebles. You're going to find guild gates with the word untapped crossed out in permanent marker.
So it just says enters the battlefield, like no
just
modifier.
Enters the battlefield. What more do you want from it? What more can we expect from these lands? So yeah, it's not a traditional cube by any sense at all, and yet in a lot of ways it is. It's like 70% traditional and 30% what in the world is going on is kind of how I describe it.
Well, that seems like a comfortable place to be too. When people sit down, they can go, okay, I recognize these pieces, and then they only have to scrunch up their forehead at like a half dozen things.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Like you can pick one, pack one, flash or tinker, and you just know the pieces are coming. But again, also understand you're going to see edited guild gates. You're going to see Tolarian Academy. You're going to see Gaia's Cradle. You're going to see Fast Bond. You're going to see a lot of very broken Magic cards, Mox Diamond. You're going to see a lot of these very broken cards, but you're also going to see a lot of traditional Legacy Plus cube cards, especially in today's day and age as power creep kind of continues to push out a lot of older ones, something I'm sure we'll talk about more later. But certainly now I do kind of feel like my cube is becoming more and more standardized because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fair place to jump in on power. You mentioned Flash, Tinker, some of the hallmarks of high-powered Magic, or at least what people expect to be high-powered Magic. How do you think of that in this context where you're just trying to have fun?
Yeah, absolutely. My big thing, there's two things I do specifically when it comes to power level. I mentioned the lands. I have a very weird land section. I've referenced the Share Your X series on the subreddit Magic Cube, and I'm currently running that. I'm about halfway through, and we encourage people to share what cards they're running section by section, casting cost by casting cost, or specific background cards like fixing lands. And we just did the fixing lands post where, again, I explained how effing weird my lands are. For listeners, I run some of the weirdest lands you will ever see in Cube. I run 2 of each guild gate with the word tapped sharpied off, so they come into play untapped. And then I run a lot of rainbow lands, and then I run a couple other fixing lands. The reason I do this insane land lineup is one of my complaints with modern Cube, especially at the higher levels, and my Cube is probably a 7 or 8 on the strict scale, which is to say it's higher powered. One of my complaints is that the lands have gotten so good, the fixing has gotten so good, that you can kind of just splash anything. You know, the joke of like the Boros deck splashing Minx and Boo is like, you know, and that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid. I don't run that Planeswalker, but that's kind of what I'm hoping to avoid in my Cube is I try to encourage 2 colors with a splash is what I'm kind of doing. And which is kind of the traditional limited deck. When you draft a limited, when you're cracking packs and playing limited, you tend to do 2 colors with a splash. And so I try to do that in my Cube, and that kind of helps bring down the power level, by which I mean you don't have the like 4 or 5 color greed piles.
Right.
And when I draft, I have people of all different skill levels. It's not just higher skilled people drafting my Cube, but there's a lot of higher skilled people drafting it. But I also have people down the skill level, and I encourage that. I like to bring new people into Cube, introduce Cube to people who perhaps have never drafted it before. And if they're drafting a higher powered Cube and don't understand how fixing works, they're going to get obliterated. You know, they're going to pass all the wrong stuff and they're going to get crushed. God bless them.
I appreciate that you mentioned that. I've talked to some friends who have talked about how unhinged you sound when you try to explain how good fetch lands are to somebody who's never played before, right? Like
exactly.
So when you look at a fetch, shock, triome mana base where you can get any color on turn 2, those sorts of things where somebody's going, why do I care that this is a swamp? Well, like, you know, and you're like 10 layers deep for somebody who may have never drafted before trying to explain why this matters.
And I run none of those.
So I feel like that's a notable exclusion there.
Absolutely. I don't run a fetch, I don't run a shock, and I don't run a triome. I don't run any of them. I run a purposely powered down land section that, again, encourages 2 color decks with a splash rather than just overpowered lands. To any decision you make, there's obviously going to be a downside, and sometimes the result is that you end up kind of getting on the rails, as we say in Cube, where like once you kind of get locked in, you're kind of there. Fine. But again, you tend to get a lot of decks that are balanced. Like when I have drafts, maybe there's 1 or 2 archetype that stands out, tends to be cheaty stuff in my Cube, as I'll explain a little bit more in a second. But for the most part, you end up with a lot of longer games and balanced games. And another reason that is I tend to omit all of the broken 1 and 2 drops. For instance, I don't run Ragavan, who probably would be fine at this point. I don't run...
Boy, that's a wild statement, by the way, Kyle. It's probably true, but it's just funny that we're all like, yeah, Ragavan's just fine.
I know. I don't run Ocelot Pride. I don't run Tamio. I don't run... I'm just looking at one of my other favorite cubes here. Shout out to Xander from the Magic Cube subreddit. I'm just going through his list because he runs everything, and he has an incredibly designed cube. I don't run Bowmasters. I don't run a Johnny. I don't run... And if it's a broken 1 or 2 drop creature, I don't run it. The result being that games tend to be dominated by mid-range and combo decks, which is a common complaint when people draft my Cube. And I hate to say it, but that's the point. The point is that you're not going to get run over by an Ocelot Pride, or you're not going to get run over by Ragavan, so that games tend to reach the mid-range and the latter portions, or you're able to pull off your combo, which is what I prefer. So again, when you make cube decisions, there's always going to be a consequence, and the consequence is that maybe aggro is not the best in my cube, but it's kind of by design.
Yeah, do you think that's kind of an expectation thing of just being able to tell people up front, like, hey, we're going for some bigger, meatier stuff here and not just turn creature sideways on turn one?
I should be a better job at telling people that. My problem is I'm having such a good time when I'm cubing that I do a terrible job explaining my
you're talking
cube.
about food
Guilty as
and
charged.
drink and
Exactly.
all the, who cares about archetypes? Like, yeah.
I'm too busy describing like this bourbon and rye and here's some Greek pizza. Oh, and the other notable thing about my cube is I run a grand total of 1 planeswalker. A total of 1. And this was, again, a throwback to box to bring it up again, because obviously we didn't have planeswalkers because they didn't exist. We drafted for years and years and years before Planeswalker even existed. So I don't include them. I probably should at this point. There's a lot of things where I designed my cube from the beginning with these things in mind. And now I'm like, is this all dumb? Should I change all of this? It's been years and years though now. So I'm at the point where I'm just going to leave it. The only Planeswalker that I run is Wrenn and 6, who is just too important to the Gruul lands decks and just Gruul in general. Though it's gotten a little bit more powerful lately. I just think it's I love that card. I love the play patterns with it, and I think it's too important to the lands deck. I ran Narset for years because I do like supporting the draw 7 combos, but it was just like the worst card in my cube.
So worst isn't like it just wasn't performing the way that you
It just never
wanted.
performed. It was like you would cast it and die. I say this in the Share Your X series a lot, where I'm always keeping track of a list of cards that I say you cast shortly before you lose the game. Like, they're fun. Sometimes they work, but for the most part, you cast them and then you lose. And Narset was one of those. Now, it just didn't, because the cube was so creature-based that it kind of like come into play and search for a non-creature card Planeswalker was just not performing.
Yeah.
And there were enough other draw 7 payoffs that I felt like I could trim it, and I don't feel like I miss it. Whereas if I cut Wrenn and 6, I would definitely miss it.
I think that's such an important metric that it's like, if this is replaceable broadly with something else, that you can cut it without feeling too badly.
Absolutely.
So let's talk combo a little bit, because I know mid-range is something that kind of happens in cubes from time to time, but combo is one that is often maligned in some of the circles that we run in. How do you engage with combo here?
I run maybe a small amount of combos. I mean, I can't even tell what is a combo and isn't anymore, to be honest with you, because the power creep has gotten so good, or so out of hand. Excuse me. I don't know if good's the right word.
Good for somebody.
Yeah, exactly. I run Tinker. I do run Hull Breacher for the draw 7 combos, but I don't run any of the other ones. I've considered the Chain of Smog one just to give Golgari a bit more of an oomph, but I haven't done it yet. Obviously, the problem with combo is that, or at least the problem that I see with it, is it becomes a little parasitic. And when I'm designing a cube, I think what I care most about is cards that cross-pollinate the most. So I'm looking for cards that are the most versatile. And so a lot of the time, the combo cards aren't. But cards have become so powerful that they just kind of become incidental combos. I think a good example of this is Pyrogoyf, which is just an absurd magic card.
Yeah, right. You don't even have to be in Goyfs. Just play this thing.
Goyfs, exactly. It just ends games naturally. Or it could combo with Goyfs, or it could combo with any kind of clone effect. I actually cut the Kiki combo from my cube in the last year and a half because it was just like, the Pyrogoyf just does this better. It doesn't cast 3 red pips. It costs 1 red pip, and then I copy it once and I win the game.
So yeah, if you get to 5, if you're doing the Kiki Jiki Restoration Angel, or you're doing some type of Splinter Twin thing, sure, that does win the game on the spot. Or you can do it a turn or 2 faster just by slamming this thing on the board and attacking.
It's crazy. I think another good example is Philia over in white, the 2-drop Philia. Great card on its own, but if you happen to have Parallax Wave, you just get to blank all your opponent's stuff. So I do run the Parallax Wave combo as well, but all those cards are also just good on their own. Obviously, Containment Priest also very good on its own.
Are these the sorts of things that your players respond well to? I know it's a weird thing to like try to analyze, but do players get into that?
Yeah, not weird at all. I don't think there's anything more important in Cube than talking to your players after a draft and getting their take on things. I'm almost 99.9% of the time, if a drafter makes a suggestion, I just do it. I really appreciate their objective views. Yeah, because it's tough to see your own cube. It's tough to see your own work. I think I mentioned I'm a writer-editor by trade, and one of the sayings in there too is it's tough to see your own work. That's why we don't edit our own stuff. Yeah. So after a draft, if someone's like, this doesn't work or this does work, I tend to just make those changes. Yeah, no one's really complained about the lack of like insta-win combos in my cube. I honestly haven't heard that once. The common complaint, again, is that aggro is tough.
I want to say that I love the sensibility, and especially coming from, a lot of my connections are in the Cube Talk Discord, or in this space that's like kind of, and I mean it in a loving way, kind of this heady thought technology type of space where it's like you want to accept feedback and consider it and chew on it and decide what you want to keep. So it's really refreshing to hear a version that's like, just throw it in there.
I do. Yeah, listen, I got talked into adding Bomba, Bombardiers, but I've just called it Bomba so much I've forgotten. I can't even call it his real name anymore. I hate that card. I absolutely hate that card. It's so brutal. Stupidly overpowerful. And I got talked back into adding it in because we had a draft and someone was like, yeah, I know, it'd fix your red problems. Like, fine. Or I'll give you a good example, though. I hate Bomba, but a card, because of my weird lands, for years I had suspected that Wasteland was actually not good in my cube. Right. And we had a draft. Actually, this was the one with the Connecticut Cube Discord folks. Again, shout out to them, great people. And one of them was in this just utterly broken Nadu lands deck. The deck steamrolled and went 6-0. Maybe it dropped a game. I don't know. But it was the winner. It was a gross deck, great deck, played very well by a great player. And he had Wasteland. And at the end of the day, he was like, I didn't Wasteland a single thing. And I think you should run Ghost Quarter instead. Okay. Because that can still target lands. It can still kill a Tolarian Academy or a Gaia's Cradle as intended. But it also has the sack trigger that you can use more easily than a Wasteland. And I was just like, that's brilliant. And I just immediately removed Wasteland and put Ghost Quarter in because that was an incredible observation by someone who was able to see a fault with my cube that I could not because, again, as the creator, I just couldn't see it. So a great example of listening to your drafters.
Yeah, maybe not even a fault, just an opportunity to try something different. And especially here, like basic lands being so much more valuable, or like a bigger part of the environment, I should say. Where
exactly.
You're not just in a wealth of lands like that.
Well said.
So do you have other projects that you curate that kind of draw from what you're learning with this cube?
No, I don't have another cube, but as we were talking about before we started recording, I love both the idea of a bar cube and I love the 100 Ornithopters cube. And if I were to build a second one, that's probably what it would be. My current side project in Magic right now is I've been building a lot of old school 1993, 1994 decks.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like a palate cleanser. You play those games and you're like, there's no tokens, there's no counters.
Well,
for the most part.
Unless you play the Hive.
Which, don't tempt me. I had a Hive deck as a kid. And it's just like, it's so refreshing. It was funny. I had a friend, we do a lot of sealed, because we're all fathers. A lot of my friends are fathers. It's not that we can't just summon a play group together. So it's a lot of us getting together and playing our cubes as sealed. And we were doing some cubes sealed a couple weeks ago. And then we played some of my 93, 94 decks afterwards. And it was almost like jarring. Like my friend was having some trouble playing the cards because he was looking at Hypnotic Spectre and he was looking at 3 swamps. And he was just like, is it that simple?
Yeah.
Or like Dark Ritual, Hypnotic Spectre, go? It was just like, it was so simple. He was almost having trouble like slowing his mind down, I think. Just go from like having to play the most modern cards imaginable to like, here's an ATOG. I sacrifice an artifact. Go.
It is wild, right? Like the complexity is not there the same way, that you get this richness of interaction from a bunch of powerful but simple effects playing together in a very different way.
Absolutely. So that's been my side project. I call it a palate cleanser, like I said earlier. It is a nice companion to playing a lot of cube.
Absolutely. Boy, and I don't want to get too lost in the weeds on old school because that's been one of the things I've dug into as well.
Follow-up podcast. Have me on sometime. We'll talk old school. I love it. Because I played all these decks as a kid. These were the kid decks I was playing in like 5th grade. It's crazy. I had an ATOG deck I played unsleeved in my playground. It was awesome.
Well, mercifully, ATOG not too dire. Some of the things ATOG eats may be more expensive.
That's true.
Well, Kyle, you've referenced the Show Your X thread on Reddit there. This was one of the things that helped us get connected here. A really fascinating, is it fair to call it a project, a community exercise? I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that is, how it works.
Sure. So this is a series that's been running for 3 or 4 years now in the Magic Cube subreddit. I didn't start it, and to be honest with you, I can't remember who did start it, but I've taken part in it since the beginning. I'm sorry, I'm going to forget the name of the gentleman who originally started it, but last year, a user, I'm going to mispronounce that terribly.
Iconic Isotope?
I think you're right. Thank you so much. And he ran it last year, and I started to bug him around the new year about whether he was going to run it again this year. And he said that he just wasn't drafting his cube enough, and he didn't feel like he was the right person to run it, which I appreciate. I respect. I said he didn't necessarily need to stop it, but if he needed someone to take it up, I'd be happy to do so. As I think I said earlier, or maybe before or after we started, for many years I ran the Survivor subreddit. And when I was at the Survivor subreddit, I ran a lot of series like this. I love encouraging community participation. We did a lot of stuff like this over at Survivor subreddit. So as soon as the opportunity came up to do this for the Magic Cube subreddit, I said, yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to host it. Again, I love encouraging discussion. I love encouraging community interaction. And that's why I took up the mantle here. So this is my first year running it. I've been enjoying it immensely.
And nobody's been eliminated so far.
No one's been eliminated so far. I did a thing on the Survivor subreddit, and I believe I did the first one and maybe the second one. I can't remember. And I believe it's still going many, many years later, where we eliminated every single person who ever played the game one at a time.
Excellent.
It took a while. This was before I had kids or a side business, as you might imagine. Anyways, so I'm enjoying this immensely.
So talk about like practically what does this look like? Because we've said share your X, but you said this is isolating specific subcategories of your cube to go through one at a time.
Yep. So yeah, we invite people to share sections one at like blue 3-drops, by which I mean all of your 3-drop creatures in blue, or blue instants, but all your blue instants, or non-creature artifacts that cost 4, or what are your fixing artifacts? What are your fixing lands? What is your Azoria section? What is your Silencia section? We're going section by section. It takes about 64 days, if I remember correctly. And you list out all of your cards and say whatever you want to about them. Some people just list the cards. Some people, like myself, get very long-winded and give like stories. I tell stories. I tell background. Again, I'm a writer-editor. I can't help it. I tell very, very long stories. Again, Xander, who I really appreciate his participation in the series through the years. He tells excellent stories as well, as do a number of people. One of the things I like about this, too, is it shows all the different cubes out there. I think a very valid complaint about the Magic Cube subreddit is that sometimes it leans into only high-powered Legacy Plus or Vintage Cube. Like everyone's like, oh, you could never play that. It could never survive power creep today. And so I think that's kind of the general attitude. And I'd like to recognize that there are cubes of all kinds, old bordered cubes that are purposely at lower power leveled. And that's what it brings out in this. And this year, I feel like we've done a really good job of bringing in people of all different cube levels. It's not, honestly, in terms of like the regular people who are posting, maybe there's like 3 or 4 who are like really high powered cubes. And then like the majority are just very unique and very cool cubes. Like I love seeing cubes where like a Juggernaut gets mentioned, or like somebody had,
yeah,
I'm going to blank on it. Skizix. Skizzit. What was that card? The ball lightning with kicker. Skizik. Somebody had that in their cube. I was like, that's awesome. I love that. I love that you're cubing with that card, and I love that it's getting a write-up here. That's what I want to see. I love seeing all the different cards and all the different cubes, because that's the beauty of Cube, is the environment is whatever you want to make of it. It's your own creativity, and I love seeing people posting all their different cubes.
Do you feel like that is a change from previous years, or as you've engaged with that? Like, is that a change in texture in the community, or?
I think it's a change, but again, I don't want to criticize people who've run this in the past or seem like I'm trying to criticize people. It's certainly something that it was a goal of mine this year, and I said it from the onset that I would love to see people post from all different cubes. So it's certainly a focus this year.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't mean that in a pejorative way either.
Of course.
Not a bad change. Just maybe just a different set of voices coming out of the woodwork to talk about.
I think so. And it's exactly. I love it. I love it so much. I think somebody had a Triskelion. I could be confusing somebody kept posting from an old border cube. But yeah, absolutely. It's something we're trying to encourage this year. And, I certainly plan on doing this again next year. And it's certainly something I want to encourage again next year.
So you mentioned it's kind of a variety. Does it feel like people are doing analysis on their decisions? Is it kind of like a show and tell thing? Is it like,
yes.
Where does it hit?
It's both. It's show and tell and analysis, but there's a lot of analysis going on. You can tell people are really coming to grips with some of their choices. And that's another good thing about this series, is that it forces you to kind of reconsider some cards that are in your cube. And I find myself making changes every single year. I make way more changes during this series than I do when the series is not running, because you really, first of all, it makes you explain every card in your cube. So you write it out and you're like, oh, maybe I don't need this. And you also see people with cubes that are similar to yours Some of these unique cubes don't really have exact replicas or something that's similar. But someone like my cube, where again, it's kind of a higher powered cube, there's at least, like I said, a handful of people also posting higher powered cubes. And I can see them saying the same kind of things, the same kind of thoughts that I'm having about my cards, which gets to one of my big takeaways from this year, is just kind of recognizing that unfortunately some of the classics in cubes, some of the OG cards are kind of really washed these days. And I hate to say it, it's painful for me to say, but like I was trying to remember the last time Armageddon got cast in my cube. And I think it was like 18 months ago. Or like Winter Orb. And I love the Winter Orb Urza combo, but speaking of combos, I love that combo, but like I'm trying to think the last time someone pulled it off. And again, it's like Urza's great on his own. And there's so many broken artifacts now, you just kind of don't need the Winter Orb. Or even like Eternal Witness, which is someone who's been a lifelong Golgari player like myself. I love Ewit. It pains me so much. I cut Ewit today. I was like, all right, It's time to go.
My condolences. Oh, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We just had the green 3 drops post.
And you were able to hold it together enough for our conversation here after.
I've cut Ewit from my cube so many times, and then just inevitably she creeps back in. So I put her on the side again. Believe me, I'm keeping her sleeved up. She'll find her way back in eventually. But that was one of my big takeaways from this year. Just some of the older cards, unfortunately, just can't keep up if you're playing with newer cards. And, I said this in one of the posts, and somebody pointed out, like, listen, you don't have to keep updating, which is a very valid point. You can keep it at a certain level. But when I cube, I like to try out the new stuff. I do. I can't help it. I want to try out the new stuff. And so that means sometimes getting rid of the old stuff.
Yeah, and I imagine that's hard to maintain an open hand if you're not accepting new stuff. It's like, yeah, I'll take your suggestions or I'll try whatever you're throwing at me as long as it's not. Fill in the blank,
Exactly.
I do think this tells us a lot about you, Kyle, that you're pining for the good old days of Winter Orb and Armageddon. It's a certain flavor there.
Well, listen, one of the first old school decks I built was an Armageddon deck. Let's leave it at that.
Oh yeah, Armageddon is a good one. I've brought that to the table a time or two.
Oh, I love that deck.
You mentioned being a Golgari player at heart. I think the Golgari thread was really one of the ones that solidified my desire to connect here and to talk through this, because I really enjoyed reading through a similar list of Golgari inclusions in a couple of cubes that had a similar texture, but all of the justifications were very different. And all of the ideas behind like why they wanted that particular card or what was working well for them or what wasn't was so varied. Like I think that was the one that really resonated for me. And like how much do you then go through those lists as the person hosting it and try to draw from like, yeah, here's something that's worked for somebody else that I want to try myself?
Absolutely. Yeah. I like to go through and read as much as I can throughout the day. I like to go back, I'll post early in the morning because that's when it's most convenient for me. And then I'll just keep going throughout the day and just getting ideas. I don't necessarily have time to respond to everybody the way I used to, again, because I got kids, I got multiple jobs, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But I'm definitely reading it all and really just taking in ideas. And again, that's one of my favorite things about this. It's just the sharing of ideas. And I wanted to mention this as well. I'd like the idea that after we're done with this, it becomes a resource. And I do. I go back to last year's thread. I go back to this last year's series. I go back to the series from 2 years ago. I will Google them and I'll go back and I'll see the way that it changed. I'll see the way that people's thinking changed. Whenever I'm making a change in my cube, or at least a significant change, I like to see what people have been saying a year ago, 2 years ago. And it's fascinating to see. Or, if someone's just getting into cube, they can Google this and see, go back the entire resource of section by section as a useful aid to build their own cube. So I appreciate everyone who contributes to these posts. I haven't said that yet. If you're contributing to these posts, I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. And thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts on these cards. It's such a useful resource for the cube community.
Absolutely.
That's my goal.
Yeah, and like there's something encouraging about seeing what others are doing in the space. How do you feel about, as a busy father, the pacing of a one a day?
I do a lot of content creation as my job. I run magazines, so I'm constantly writing articles, posting articles. I have a side business where I'm doing social media and communications for clients. So I'm constantly putting together posts. I'm constantly putting together this. My day is just like a beat, content. So it's a good fit. That's partly the reason I said yes to it, because I knew it would fit. I think I've been late once. I'm trying to remember why. Even though the day I had an emergency root canal, I still managed to get a post up. So I'm a creature of habit. I am. I'm a stickler to daily routines and to-do lists. So I've been able to do it. And that's why I post at 8 a.m. every single morning, because that's just easy for me. Do it before I get out the door.
And teeth can't get in the way of a good magic post.
That's right.
Well, you kind of mentioned one of the big takeaways about the classics can't always hang in an ever
Yeah.
evolving space. Have you found other like broad sensibility changes that you're seeing in the community, or like anything that you've learned from this experience so far?
No, I think this year that's my big takeaway. In past years, because again, I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now in this series. I remember in past years, especially I think it was 2 years ago, where like the power creep really became noticeable all of a sudden. During the Fire era, where we were just having just disgusting cards thrust upon us set after set, and it's just like Cube has gotten so much more powerful all of a sudden. So I think there was this big shift in a lot of higher powered cubes 2 or 3 years ago, where now I feel like the dust has kind of settled. We've gotten a lot of good new cards as well, but I feel like everyone's kind of figured out the power level they want and kind of settled. So I feel like this was more of like a settling period where, again, the big takeaway is some of the cards that are, 30 years old are perhaps not as good as cards that were printed last month. And that's not an enormous surprise.
Yeah, creatures for sure, I think. It's funny that you have a lot of those non-creature spells. You mentioned like old school, where you just have a lot of powerful effects printed at simple, effective rates, but then you have creatures that can do all that and
Very well said. I can't remember who, somebody described Cube, or at least higher powered cubes, as watching modern creatures interact with old school spells.
Yep.
And I thought that was a perfect way to describe Cube.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
Swords to Plowshares isn't going to be power crept. Let's hope so, at least.
Boy, yeah, let's hope not. Well, Kyle, as you think about your main cube and some of what you're seeing with the Share Your X project, what advice would you want to pass on to others as they're thinking about their own projects?
So the advice I always give to people when they cube or they're getting into cube is there's nothing more valuable than actually playing your cube. Like, it's one thing to design it on Cube Cobra, but as soon as you run your cube, the first time you run your cube, you're going to know right away what cards you do and do not want. You're going to know immediately what cards do not hack it in your cube. So the most important thing is to get some friends together and play. And again, it's a lot of fun designing cube, and Lord knows I'm on Cube Cobra all the time. I love that website. Again, shout out to those people. But just playing your cube, you're going to know right away what does and doesn't work. There's nothing more valuable than actually playing your cube, which is the point of cube, is to play it.
Yeah, right. As much time as we spend in the spreadsheets, it's good to be reminded sometimes. Just get it to the table.
Absolutely.
And especially with something like this thread, where you are talking to a bunch of other folks who are deep in the theory spot. Like, if you are committed enough to put one of these posts together, you've put the thought in.
Absolutely.
Well, Kyle, this has been delightful. Before we wrap up, I do get to ask you one of my favorite questions, which is, if you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick and who would you have do the illustration?
So I love this question. This is a great question. By the way, you asked so many great questions. Again, as somebody who does interviews for his job, very, very good job. I really appreciate everything you asked tonight, and I appreciate you creating content for the community. So invitational card, I'm not going to make up a card for you because the card that I would create already exists. And
Okay,
speaking
good.
of the Golgari thread, the card that I would have made is Alpha Deathclaw.
Nice.
So again, I played so much Golgari as a kid. When Recurring Nightmare, which is my favorite card ever printed, I was in junior high when Exodus printed, and it was just like love at first sight for me, Recurring Nightmare and Survival of the Fittest, and that began a lifelong love of Golgari for me, which of course was only further inspired later when Spiritmonger printed.
Yes.
I love Spiritmonger. Spiritmonger, an OG art, glowed up version of the Spiritmonger art, is my go-to playmat. I love Spiritmonger. It's one of my favorite cards ever printed. Obviously, it's not even remotely playable.
Yeah.
On
Talk
today's standard.
about the classics that are washed now. That one makes me sad.
And so I think Alpha Deathclaw is the modern version of Spiritmonger, by which I mean it's just like generic Golgari WinCon. It's a giant, big, dumb stats monger, but it also works with Recurring Nightmare because it has an insane ETB ability. And if you want to play Golgari Ramp, which I also enjoy, by the way, you can bring it in and then just give it monstrosity and kill two things. So that would be it. My invitational card exists. It would just be Alpha Deathclaw. And my wish for the art, and I might do this at some point, is I might custom print a copy of it with Spiritmonger art.
There you go.
I've been thinking of that for years. I've been thinking of just doing that, just custom printing it with the original Spiritmonger art and just saying, there it is. That's my old friend, souped up for a modern era.
Glenn Angus is that artist.
Glenn Angus. Interesting. I would love to get his signature. I don't have any signed cards at current moment. I would love... That's not true. I have a signed Prodigal Sorcerer.
Hey, there you go.
Because I own about 360 Prodigal Sorcerers.
Okay, this is like a collection for you.
if I can listen, why don't we end on this story? So when I was a kid, again, playing Magic in the 90s and 2000s, and I started playing Magic, I think in 1994. If it wasn't 94, it was 95, but it was no later than 95. And so I played a ton during that classic era. And at some point in my childhood, I don't know why, I do know why, it's because I love Monty Python and I love the Tim joke, and I don't know when, but I started asking for Prodigal Sorcerer with every single trade that I did. And I played, again, a ton of Magic all over Massachusetts in the 90s. I was going into Boston for tournaments, set releases, and I accumulated hundreds and hundreds of Prodigal Sorcerers to the extent that I had a binder
That's amazing.
this thick of Prodigal Sorcerers, and I would go into Boston for
indicating like a 2-inch binder for those at home.
Giant binder. That's right. I'm sorry. This is not a video podcast. 350, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of Prodigal Sorcerers. And I would go into tournaments in Boston. Again, precocious little me playing Magic against adults. We would trade, and I would give them that binder, and I would be like, "Does anything in here catch your eye?" And then I would watch the look on their faces. They realize this is nothing but Prodigal Sorcerers.
Did you ever catch somebody who was looking for Prodigal Sorcerers?
No, because nobody was looking for Prodigal Sorcerers like I was. There's a second half to this story. So I went to college. My parents threw away most of my belongings as soon as I moved out, in classic boomer fashion. If you're a boomer, I'm sorry. If you're listening, you're a boomer, I'm sorry. But a lot of boomers, they just couldn't wait to turn their kids' childhood bedrooms into guest bedrooms so they could continue hosting their boomer parties, whatever. And they threw away so many things. And for many, 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 many years, I just assumed this included the Prodigal Sorcerer collection I had. Because why wouldn't they have tossed that? It's a binder of one card. So flash forward probably like 26 years. I'm at my parents' house and I'm just digging through like the remains of my childhood in my bedroom. And what did I find at the very bottom of the pile? I found my Prodigal Sorcerer collection.
Yes.
I have it again. And I've started adding. Every time I get an order from TCG, I pop on a Prodigal Sorcerer if possible.
Keep throwing them on there.
So it's growing again. And that's why I have a signed one, because I bought one a couple months ago.
So good. And your home address so we can mail you Prodigal Sorcerer. No, I'm just kidding. Don't.
That's right. Mail them to. I will take all your Prodigal Sorcerers.
That's so good. Well, Kyle, this has been a delight, man. I'm so glad that we got the chance to sit down and chat.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
pleasure.
much for staying up late on my behalf here.
Thank you.
If folks want to follow up, if they want to contribute to the threads, if they want to learn any more
Yes,
about your projects or anything you do, where should we point them?
I would go directly to the subreddit, and that's MTG Cube. That's the subreddit, MTG Cube. My personal projects, if you want to learn way too much about the economics of the alcohol industry, I run Beverage Dynamics and Stateways. Beverage Dynamics covers liquor stores. Stateways covers control states. I also have a whole bunch of clients I do content for. You don't need to follow them. But definitely go to MTG Cube. Check out the great community there. I'm not even a moderator. I'm just someone who runs this series. I'd be happy to become a moderator if you guys need me to be, if you're listening and you're one of the moderators. But yeah, come check out the community there and go to your local Cube Discord. I'm sure there's a Discord community in your neighborhood. Go join that as well.
Oh, very good. Kyle, again, this has been a treat. I appreciate you taking the time to do it. Cheers to you. And here's hoping there's more chances to connect in the future.
Absolutely. Cheers to you as well. Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.